Hello everyone, and welcome to the Ben 10 What Ifs. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Ben 10 wielded the devil Omnitrix and got Harem of Charmcaster, Looma and Rayona. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Devil's Bargain. Sulphurous air seared Ben Tennyson's lungs as he descended deeper into the obsidian cavern. Sweat trickled down his spine, darkening the fabric of his midnight blue tactical suit. 5 years since he'd lost the Omnitrix, and still the plumbers dispatched him to investigate the most godforsaken corners of the universe. Today's particular corner. The volcanic underworld of Pyros, homeworld of the Pyronite species. Structural integrity at 60% and falling, murmured the AI in his earpiece. Recommend immediate evacuation. Ben ignored the warning, adjusting his breathing apparatus before vaulting over a fissure in the stone floor. Molten magma bubbled 20 feet below, casting his shadow in sharp relief against the cavern walls. Noted. Rita, what's our radiation reading? Tachyon emissions increasing. Source approximately 70 meters ahead. Benjamin, this signature matches no known pyronite technology. He grinned despite himself. When has known technology ever been our problem? The distant rumble of shifting tectonic plates sent a tremor through the passage. Tiny obsidian shards rained from above, pinging against his reinforced shoulder guards. The standard-issue plumber armor felt clumsy compared to the elegant protection the Omnitrix once provided, but it would keep him alive. Probably. Cave-in imminent in approximately 4 minutes, Rita continued, her artificially calm voice at odds with the dire prediction. Plenty of time, Ben muttered, though the words rang hollow even to his own ears. 5 years. 5 years since he'd stood toe-to-toe with Vilgax for the final time. 5 years since the warlord had torn the Omnitrix from his wrist, only for the failsafe to trigger a catastrophic power surge that had destroyed them both. Ben had survived. Barely, but the Omnitrix was gone, taking with it the transformative abilities that had defined half his life. The passage widened suddenly, opening into a vast chamber hewn from volcanic glass. Stalagmites erupted from the floor like the teeth of some primordial beast, while the distant ceiling disappeared into shadow. At the chamber's center stood a perfect circle of 13 obsidian columns, each carved with symbols that seemed to writhe and shift in the dim light. Jackpot, Ben whispered. The energy readings had led him here, to this forgotten temple buried beneath Pyros' volatile crust. Intelligence suggested the recent tectonic instability had uncovered something ancient, something that predated even Pyronite civilization. Something that had been deliberately buried. As Ben approached the circle, the air grew thick with static electricity. The hair on his arms stood on end beneath his armor. At the center of the columns lay a raised dais of the same black stone, and atop it. Rita, are you seeing this? Affirmative. Object appears technological in nature, despite magical containment signatures. Preliminary analysis suggests Galvan origin, but predating all known Galvan artifacts in the database. The device resembled an Omnitrix, unmistakably so, but twisted into something darker. Its housing gleamed blood red in the volcanic light, with circuit patterns etched in obsidian black rather than the familiar green. Where Azimuth's creation had been elegant in its simplicity, this device bristled with serrated edges and exposed components that resembled nothing so much as exposed sinew. Benjamin, Rita's voice dropped an octave, a programmed response to heightened danger. Evacuation is now mandatory. Structural collapse in 2 minutes. Another tremor shook the chamber. Stronger than before, a stalactite crashed to the floor mere feet from where Ben stood, shattering into razor-sharp fragments. The columns began to sway. Decision time. 5 years as a merely human operative had taught Ben caution. But 5 years before that, and 5 years before that, had taught him something else, when the universe presented you with impossible choices. You jumped first and calculated the odds later. He strode forward, the ground shaking beneath his boots, and reached for the device. Benjamin, I strongly mute, Ben commanded, and Rita's warnings fell silent. His fingers closed around the device. For a heartbeat, nothing happened, and then agony lanced up his arm as the thing sprang to life, its housing unfolding like the petals of some mechanical flower. Metal tendrils whipped outward, piercing the armor at his wrist as if it were tissue paper, burrowing into flesh and bone with mechanical precision. Ben's scream echoed through the collapsing chamber as the device grafted itself to him. Blood dripped onto the stone dais, sizzling where it touched the ancient surface. The pain was beyond anything he'd experienced, beyond even the white-hot agony of the original Omnitrix's destruction. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pain vanished. The device sealed itself around his wrist with a sound like a satisfied sigh. The display flickered to life, cycling through unfamiliar silhouettes that resembled corrupted versions of the aliens he'd once transformed into. Well, Ben managed through gritted teeth, that's new. The chamber gave a violent shudder. Fissures snaked across the floor, venting superheated gas that fogged his visor. The columns began to topple, one after another, their ancient forms surrendering to gravity after eons of silent vigilance. No time for regrets, no time for anything but survival. Ben sprinted for the passage, leaping over widening cracks and dodging falling debris. The tunnel entrance was collapsing even as he reached it, stones tumbling from above to block the way. He dove through the narrowing gap, feeling stones scrape against his back as the ceiling came down behind him. "Rita, unmute. Give me an escape route." The AI's voice returned, somehow managing to sound disapproving despite her programming. "Calculating optimal path. Be advised. Your vital signs are fluctuating wildly. Medical intervention recommended upon return." "Just get me out of here," Ben gasped, running blindly through tunnels now filled with choking dust and steam. The device on his wrist pulsed with a crimson heartbeat, synchronizing with his own racing pulse. Evacuation route compromised, alternative pathways similarly unstable, survival probability below acceptable parameters. Ben skidded to a halt as the passage ahead collapsed completely. Trapped, the way forward blocked, the way back already buried. Heat built around him as magma breached the lower levels, rising inexorably toward his position. He stared at the device on his wrist, its alien display cycling through those strange, twisted silhouettes. What choice did he have? "Here goes everything," he muttered, and slammed his palm down on the interface. The transformation hit him like a freight train. Where the original Omnitrix had felt like slipping into a new skin, uncomfortable but ultimately natural, this was invasion. His cells screamed as they reconfigured, bones cracking and reforming, organs shifting and multiplying. His consciousness expanded and contracted simultaneously, forcing him to experience very excruciating detail of the metamorphosis. Fire erupted from his skin, not the controlled flames of a pyronite, but something darker, hungrier. Magma dripped from joints that shouldn't exist, sizzling against the stone floor. His vision split into a heat-mapping spectrum that revealed the world in gradients of consumption potential. The transformation complete, Ben, or the thing that had been. Ben straightened to a height half again what it had been. A corona of black flames danced around a body composed of cooling obsidian plates and rivers of molten rock. Where Heat Blast had been a living torch, this was a walking volcanic event. "Inferno," the creature growled, its voice the sound of tectonic plates grinding together. The name had come unbidden, whispered directly into his transformed consciousness by the device itself. Inferno raised a clawed hand, and the collapsing tunnel before him simply melted. Stone liquefied, running in superheated rivulets down to join the rising magma below. The creature strode forward, each footstep leaving molten depressions in the floor. The incredible heat that would have instantly killed Ben in his human form now felt pleasantly cool against Inferno's obsidian skin. A distant part of Ben's consciousness observed with horrified fascination. The original Omnitrix had always maintained his core self, his humanity, during transformations. This was different. This felt like being a passenger in his own transformed body, watching as something else piloted his borrowed form. "Burn," Inferno rumbled, the single word carrying implicatio. NS that sickened the human part of Ben's awareness. Not just the desire to burn, but to consume. To reduce. To leave nothing but ash. No, this wasn't right. Ben fought against the alien instincts, clawing his way back toward control. The Omnitrix, the original, had taught him how to assert his will over transformations. This might be different, but the principle had to be the same. "I'm Benjamin Kirby Tennyson," he thought fiercely. "Wielder of the Omnitrix, hero of Earth, and I am in control." *. For a moment, The struggle was so intense that Inferno actually froze mid-stride, black flames sput, tearing as two minds warred for dominance. Then, gradually, the balance shifted. The hunger for destruction didn't vanish, but it receded, becoming manageable, a whispered suggestion rather than an overwhelming compulsion. Inferno. Ben straightened. My choice, he growled. My power. With newfound control, he resumed his path upward, melting through stone barriers and cooling the magma that threatened to overtake him. The creature's instinctive knowledge guided his movements, allowing him to sense structural weaknesses and avoid triggering further collapse. 10 minutes later, Inferno saint through the final layer of stone into open air. The hellish landscape of Pyros spread out before him, a vista of volcanic plains and rivers of lava beneath a sky perpetually darkened by ash clouds. In the distance, the sleek form of his plumber ship waited on a stable plateau, though stable was a relative term on a planet as geologically hyperactive as Pyros. Inferno leapt from the mouth of the collapsing tunnel, leaving superheated footprints in the igneous rock as he sprinted toward the ship. The alien body moved with a fluid grace that belied its seemingly rigid construction, covering ground with impossible speed. As he approached the vessel, a crimson light pulsed at his wrist, a warning. The transformation was timing out, though Ben hadn't activated any command to return to human form. The device, it seemed, had its own limitations. The change back was as violent as the transformation had been. Ben fell to his knees as obsidian plates shattered, revealing human flesh beneath. Black flames guttered and died. The molten core that had powered Inferno cooled and contracted, leaving Ben gasping on hands and knees beside his ship as his human physiology reasserted itself. Blood trickled from his nose, and a metallic taste filled his mouth. His vision swam, the edges darkening as shock set in. His armored suit was scorched and partially melted, the advanced materials barely having survived the transformation. Rita, he croaked, prep medical protocols and initiate launch sequence. Get us off this rock. The ship's ramp descended in response, and Ben dragged himself aboard with the last of his strength. As the entry sealed behind him and the medical suite's robotic arms reached to stabilize his condition, he caught sight of the device on his wrist. The display had gone dark, but a subtle crimson pulse still emanated from within, like a heartbeat in standby mode. What have I done? He whispered, before unconsciousness claimed him. The plumbers, Earth quarters had changed dramatically in the years since Ben had first set foot there as a teenager. What had once been a hidden underground base beneath Bellwood had expanded into a sprawling complex had seamlessly blended alien architecture with human design sensibilities. In the wake of the incursion invasion and humanity's subsequent accelerated introduction to the galactic community, there had been little point in maintaining the secrecy of earlier years. Ben sat on an examination table in the medical wing, staring at the device on his wrist while a holographic scan painted his arm in ghostly blue light. The pain had subsided to a dull ache, though the memories of the transformation remained vivid. I've never seen anything like it, muttered Blukik, one of the Galvan technicians who had been called in to examine the device. It's definitely Galvan work, but wrong, somehow. The architecture resembles Azimuth's early prototypes, added his perpetual companion Dryba, adjusting the scanner's settings. But these modifications are disturbing. Ben flexed his fingers, watching as the device's housing shifted subtly to accommodate the movement. Unlike the original Omnitrix, which had sat atop his wrist like a bulky watch, this thing had partially embedded itself beneath his skin. Metallic tendrils were visible beneath his flesh, a network of artificial veins spreading several inches up his forearm. Can you remove it? He asked, already knowing the answer. Blukik and Dryba exchanged glances. Not without removing most of your arm along with it, Dryba said bluntly. The integration is unlike anything in our records, Blukik added. It's not just attached to you, it's rewriting you at the cellular level. Ben suppressed a shudder. What about the DNA samples? Can you tell what I'm working with here? Another uncomfortable exchange of glances. We've identified some of the transformation signatures, Dryba said cautiously. They correspond to species you've previously encountered, but what? Blukik pulled up a holographic display. They're wrong. Corrupted. Somehow. Take this one. He indicated a silhouette that vaguely resembled a pyronite. The base genetic structure is pyronite, but it's been modified extensively. Enhanced in some respects, but also destabilized. Like the difference between a natural wildfire and an accelerant-fueled inferno. Dryba added helpfully. Ben's mind flashed back to the hunger he'd felt in his transformed state. The desire not just to burn, but to consume. And the others, similar patterns. Tetraman, Petrosapian, Conductoid. We've identified about 10 species so far, but there are more we don't recognize at all. And there's something else, Blukik said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Despite the private examination room. The device is thinking. Thinking. Ben echoed. Dryba nodded vigorously. The original Omnitrix had an AI system, of course, but it was essentially a highly advanced user interface. This device appears to have a fully autonomous neural network. It's processing, learning, adapting to you. Or making you adapt to it, Blukik muttered. A chill ran down Ben's spine. What are you saying? Quote, we're saying, Dryba said carefully, that this isn't just a tool, Ben. It's at least partially alive, and it has its own agenda. Ben was saved from having to respond by a sharp knock at the door. Without waiting for an answer, Magister Rook Blanco entered, his feline features set in their usual impassive expression. The years had added a few scars to the Ravanagander's face, along with the silver insignia of his elevated rank within the plumbers. Ben, Rook nodded. I am told you have acquired a new accessory. Despite everything, Ben couldn't help but smile. 5 years as partners had done little to change Rook's formal speech patterns, though his understanding of human idioms had improved marginally. You could say that. Meet the new wrist ornament from hell. Ben held up his arm, the device's crimson display cycling lazily through alien silhouettes. Rook's eyes narrowed as he studied the device. The resemblance to the Omnitrix is unmistakable. Have you made contact with Azimuth? 3 guesses what the first thinker thinks about this development, Ben said dryly. Actually, you only need one. He's furious. Says it's a prohibited prototype that never should have left Galvan Prime. Did he offer to remove it? Ben shook his head. He made it very clear that I've made my bed and now I have to sleep in it, his exact words. Which means he's been working on his Earth expressions. Said he warned me once about tampering with things beyond my comprehension, and he's not in the habit of repeating himself. Rook's RS twitched, his version of a sympathetic grimace. That is, unfortunate. Tell me about it. So what brings the great Magister Blanco down to visit a mere field operative? Rook's expression turned grave. There has been an incident in downtown Bellwood. Reports of anomalous magical activity near the museum district. Given your history with such matters, you thought I'd want in, Ben finished. Already sliding off the examination table. You thought right. Blukik. Dryba, we'll continue this later. Send whatever you find to my personal terminal. The Galvan technicians nodded, though their concerned expressions spoke volumes about how much they still had to discuss. Ben, Rook said as they left the medical wing, I must ask, are you certain you wish to engage in field operations ITH an untested device of unknown origin attached to you? The potential for complications is significant. Ben flexed his wrist, watching the device's display flare briefly in response. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that these things don't come with instruction manuals. The only way to understand it is to use it. That approach has nearly resulted in your demise on multiple occasions, Rook pointed out, not unkindly. Nearly being the operative word. Ben grinned, some of his old cockiness resurfacing. Besides, if there's magical trouble brewing, I want to be there. For old time's sake, if nothing else. The museum district of Bellwood had been rebuilt extensively following the incursion invasion. What had once been a modest collection of cultural institutions had expanded into a world-class complex, showcasing artifacts not just from Earth's history but from across the galaxy. The centerpiece was the Museum of Interplanetary Cultural Heritage, a gleaming structure of glass and alien alloys that housed treasures from 100 worlds. It was currently surrounded by a shimmering dome of violet energy. Ben and Rook pulled up in Rook's prototroop, the Ravanaga. Ender had never given up his signature vehicle, though it had been upgraded substantially over the years. They joined the perimeter of plumber agents already on site, maintaining a barrier to keep civilians at a safe distance. Sitrep. Rook demanded of the nearest agent, a young Piscis Volan who snapped to attention at the Magister's approach. Sir, energy barrier manifested approximately 40 minutes ago. Museum staff and visitors were evacuated before it fully formed. We've detected a single humanoid life sign inside, along with fluctuating magical energy patterns consistent with high-level spellcasting. Any demands or communication from inside? Ben asked. None, sir. We've attempted to establish contact, but the barrier blocks all conventional signals. Ben studied the dome thoughtfully. The color and texture of the energy field was naggingly familiar. Have we tried unconventional signals? Magical resonance patterns, maybe. The agent blinked in surprise. I don't believe we have that capability on site. Sir. No, Ben murmured, but I'm betting our uninvited guest does. He stepped forward, approaching the barrier despite Rook's warning hand on his shoulder. The device on his wrist pulsed more rapidly as he drew nearer, its crimson glow intensifying. Ben stopped a few feet from where the shimmering energy met the pavement. I know you can hear me, he called, pitching his voice to Carrie. And I know who you are. The question is, do you still know who you are? Charmcaster. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the barrier rippled, a section D, directly in front of Ben, thinning until he could make out a distorted figure on the other side. A feminine voice, tinged with both surprise and amusement, filtered through. Well, if it isn't the boy hero all grown up. Love the new look, Tennyson. The whole, battle-scarred veteran, aesthetic really works for you. Despite everything, Ben felt his lips twitch upward. Some things never changed, and you're still breaking into museums. Don't you think we're both a little old for these games? The barrier shimmered again, and suddenly a face pressed against it from the inside, a woman's face, pale and striking. Framed by silver-white hair, violet eyes studied him with unnerving intensity. Oh, I don't know, Charmcaster said, her voice now coming through clearly. Some games get more interesting with age. But this isn't a game, Tennyson. This is necessity. Let me guess, Ben said. You're after something specific, something magical, something dangerous. Her smile widened. My, aren't we perceptive these days? Yes, I need an artifact. No, you can't stop me. And yes, if I don't get it, very bad things will happen to a lot of innocent people, including your precious Bellwood. Ben considered this. In their youth, he would have dismissed such claims as typical villain monologuing. But the years had taught him that threats were rarely so black and white. Charmcaster, or Hope, as she sometimes preferred to be called, had straddled the line between villain and reluctant ally more than once. Convince me, he said simply. Charmcaster blinked, clearly taken aback by his response. What? No immediate transformation, no righteous speech about justice and heroism. Who are you and what have you done with Ben Tennyson? People change, even you. Ben stepped closer to the barrier. Close enough that he could feel its magical energy raising the hair on his arms. Tell me what you're after and why, and maybe we can find a solution that doesn't involve a standoff with the plumbers. She studied him for a long moment, suspicion warring with something else in her expression. Then her gaze dropped to his wrist, and her eyes widened. By the sacred flames of legerdemain, she whispered. What have you done, Ben? Before he could respond, the device on his wrist flared with crimson light. The display cycled rapidly through alien silhouettes before settling on Wanda. She resembled a conductoid, feedback species, but with jagged, asymmetrical proportions that made Ben's eyes hurt to focus on. The barrier between them pulsed, responding to the device's energy signature. Charmcaster jerked back as if burned, genuine alarm replacing her usual sardonic expression. That's not the Omnitrix, she said, her voice taut with sudden tension. That's something else, something wrong. I'm aware, Ben replied dryly. Recent acquisition, still working out the kinks. You fool, Charmcaster hissed, all pretense of banter vanishing. Do you have any idea what you've bound yourself to? That's no mere transformation device. It's a soul engine, a forbidden artifact of chaos magic. Ben glanced down at the device, which continued to pulse in time with the barrier's fluctuations. Soul engine, a device that draws power directly from the user's life force and spiritual essence. They were banned by every major magical conclave thousands of years ago because they inevitably corrupt their wielders. Her eyes narrowed. Where did you find it? Buried temple on Pyros. Someone went to a lot of trouble to keep it hidden. For good reason. Charmcaster pressed a palm against the barrier from her side. Her expression now deadly serious. Listen to me, Ben. Whatever it's offering you, power, control, revenge, it's not worth the price. That thing will hollow you out from the inside. The earnestness in her voice gave Ben pause. In all their years of antagonism and occasional alliance, he'd never heard Charmcaster speak with such urgent sincerity. I appreciate the concern, he said carefully. But it's a little late for warnings. The thing's pretty thoroughly attached. He raised his arm, letting her see where the device's metallic tendrils had embedded themselves beneath his skin. Charmcaster swore in a language Ben didn't recognize, something ancient and guttural that made the barrier between them momentarily flicker. Then we have a bigger problem than I thought. We, her violet eyes locked with his. Yes, we, because what I'm after in this museum is directly connected to what you're wearing. And if I don't secure it before certain other interested parties get their hands on it, that thing on your wrist is going to be the least of our worries. Before Ben could question her further, a deafening crack split the air. The barrier fluctuated wildly, sections turning from violet to an angry red. Charmcaster staggered backwards, one hand pressed to her temple. They're here, she gasped. Tennyson, I need your help. Drop the barrier, Fro. I'm your side. I can't maintain it while fighting them off. Fighting who off? Ben demanded, but he could already see shadowy figures materializing inside the dome, humanoid shapes wrapped in hooded cloaks of midnight blue. Charmcaster's hands blazed with magical energy as she turned to face the intruders. The Midnight Conclave, she called over her shoulder. They want what I want, but for very different reasons. Make your choice. Ben, help me or watch them take artifacts that will let them weaponize the thing on your wrist. Ben didn't hesitate. 5 years of plumber training had honed High's ability to make split-second judgment calls, and right now, his instincts told him Charmcaster was telling the truth, or at least a version of it that aligned with their mutual interests. Rook, he shouted, backing away from the barrier. Get your people back. We need a containment perimeter at least 2 blocks out. The Ravanagonder's expression showed he had questions, but years of partnership had built an unshakable trust. He nodded sharply and began issuing orders to the assembled plumbers. Ben turned his attention to the device on his wrist. The display still showed the conductoid-like silhouette, pulsing in time with the fluctuating barrier. He placed his palm over it, hesitating only briefly before pressing down. Please don't let this be a mistake, he muttered as the transformation began. The change was as violent as before, though marginally less painful now that he knew what to expect. His body elongated, limbs stretching to impossible proportions. Skin hardened into a chitinous exoskeleton. Midnight black rather than feedback's usual coloration, with crimson circuitry patterns etching themselves across the surface. Antennae erupted from his head, crackling with dark energy that arced between them like miniature lightning storms. Overload, the creature growled, the name once again coming unbidden from the device's influence. Where feedback had been an energy manipulator, capable of absorbing and redirecting power, Overload seemed designed for something more aggressive. Energy didn't flow into him so much as it was violently torn from its source, converted into something darker, and amplified before being expelled. The barrier before him registered as a feast, a massive source of power ripe for the taking. As before, Ben felt the alien instinct threatening to overwhelm his consciousness. The hunger to consume, to drain, to leave nothing but emptiness in his wake. He fought it, wrestling control back from the edge. My power, my choice, my responsibility. With newfound focus, Overload reached toward the barrier. Tendrils extended from his fingertips, plunging into the magical field. Instantly, energy surged into him, not just the power of the barrier itself, but the very essence of the spellwork that had created it. Magical formulas, arcane symbols, the structural underpinnings of Charmcaster's creation, all of it flooded into his awareness as Overload absorbed and processed it. The barrier began to destabilize, flickering wildly as sections collapsed. Overload directed the absorbed energy, channeling it to weaken the dome in a controlled fashion rather than causing a catastrophic collapse that might have leveled half the museum district. Inside, Charmcaster was engaged in a frantic magical battle with the hooded figures. Bolts of violet energy flew from her hands, countering their attacks of writhing shadow stuff. She was holding her own, but only just. 3 against 1 were poor odds, even for a sorceress of her caliber. With a final surge of effort, Overload tore open a gap in the barrier wide enough to step through. The alien form moved with unnatural grace, covering the distance to Charmcaster's position in 3 long strides. A hooded figure turned at his approach, hands raised to attack, only to scream in agony as Overload's tendrils latched onto its chest, draining the very magical essence that powered its assault. Consumption complete, Overload rumbled, his voice a distorted bass that vibrated the very air. The hooded figure collapsed, its cloak suddenly empty as if whatever had inhabited it had been entirely absorbed. Charmcaster spared him a quick glance, shock evident in her expression before she returned her focus to her remaining opponents. Tennyson, is that still you in there? Enough remains. It wasn't entirely true. Maintaining his identity within Overload's consciousness was like trying to hold onto a life raft in a hurricane, but it was the best he could manage. Together, they made short work of the remaining attackers. Charmcaster's spells corralled them while Overload drained their energy, each hooded figure collapsing into empty garments once its power was consumed. The fighting was brutal and efficient, a far cry from the showy battles of Ben's youth. As the last opponent fell, Charmcaster turned to face him fully. Up close, the years since their last encounter were evident in subtle ways, fine lines at the corners of her eyes, a certain hardened quality to her features that spoke of difficult experiences. But the fierce intelligence and dangerous charisma that had always defined her remained unchanged. Well, she said, breathing heavily from the exertion of the battle, your taste in transformations has certainly taken a dark turn. Not my choice, Overload replied, the words emerging with difficulty through vocal apparatus ill-suited to human speech. Device provides. I adapt. That's what I'm afraid of. She gestured to the empty cloaks scattered around them. Do you realize what you just did? You didn't defeat them. You consumed them. Their magical essence, their very being, it's all inside you now. Before Overload could respond, the crimson display on his chest began to flash, a warning that the transformation was timing out. The change back was just as violent as before, leaving Ben gasping on his knees amid the scattered remnants of their opponents. Charmcaster knelt beside him, concern temporarily overriding her usual guarded demeanor. Easy, Tennyson. The first few transformations with a soul engine are always the worst. Your body's still adjusting to the energy drain. Ben wiped blood from his nose, fighting the wave of nausea that accompanied his return to human form. You seem to know an awful lot about this thing. I know a lot about a lot of things. The sardonic edge had returned to her voice. Especially the kind of things that can get people killed in spectacularly unpleasant ways. Ben struggled to his feet, noting with dismay that the museum's interior had sustained significant damage during their battle. Display cases were shattered, artifacts strewn across the floor amid broken glass and twisted metal. So what exactly were you after that was worth all this? Charmcaster's expression turned guarded. The Grimoire of Archimata, a spell book containing rituals that can bind, control, or destroy soul engines like the one attached to your wrist. And you wanted it because, she said, her voice dropping to ensure they wouldn't be overheard by the plumbers now caught. Easily entering through the gap in the barrier, I've been tracking the Midnight Conclave for months. They're collecting artifacts of chaos magic, weapons that haven't been seen since the interdimensional wars. I didn't know about your little fashion accessory until today, but I'd bet my entire spell arsenal that it's part of whatever they're planning. Ben studied her, searching for signs of deception. The years had taught him caution, particularly when dealing with someone whose moral compass had always been as variable as Charmcaster's. But there was an urgency in her manner that felt genuine. The Conclave, he said. Who are they? A cabal of chaos mages, dimensional travelers, and power-hungry fools who think they can control forces that would drive most beings mad. She grimaced. They've been operating in the shadows for centuries, but lately they've become more active. More aggressive, and the book you were after would help stop them. Charmcaster glanced around at the destruction surrounding them. Then at the approaching plumbers. This isn't the place for this conversation. But yes, the grimoire contains rituals that could help. Unfortunately, I'm guessing our who Dead friends already secured it while we were distracted with their attack dogs. Ben made a quick decision. Rook, he called to his partner, who was now coordinating the plumber response team, I need to debrief our consultant here privately. Can you handle things here? Rook's expression was dubious, but he nodded. I will file the appropriate report. But Ben, the Magisterial Council will want answers about this incident. And they'll get them, Ben promised. As soon as I have some to give. He turned back to Charmcaster, keeping his voice low. We need to talk. Somewhere secure. And I want the whole story. Not just the convenient parts. She arched an eyebrow. Someone's developed trust issues in their old age. Let's just say experience has been an effective teacher. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Fine, I know a place. But we'll need to move quickly. The Conclave doesn't give up easily, and now they know both of us are involved. Lead the way, Ben said, N added as an afterthought. And just so we're clear, if this turns out to be some elaborate scheme to steal my new toy, I'll remember that I've never actually tried to see how far plumber jurisdiction extends into legerdemain. Charmcaster's laugh was genuine, if tinged with bitterness. Oh, Tennyson, if I wanted that thing, I'd be figuring out how to remove it without killing you. Trust me and I say no sane practitioner of the arts would willingly bind themselves to a soul engine. Her eyes darted to the device on his wrist, which had resumed its idle cycling of alien silhouettes. But since you've already made that particular mistake, we might as well make the best of it. As they slipped away from the chaos of the museum, Ben couldn't help but feel he'd crossed some invisible threshold, that in accepting this strange device and now aligning with Charmcaster, he'd set himself on a path from which there would be no easy return. The device on his wrist pulsed once, as if in agreement. Charmcaster's idea of somewhere secure turned out to be an abandoned warehouse in Bellwood's industrial district, a cliché that Ben didn't hesitate to point out as they approached the derelict building. Really, he said, eyeing the crumbling facade with undisguised skepticism. This is your secure location. It's like you're not even trying to avoid villain stereotypes. She shot him an irritated glance. Appearances can be deceiving, Tennyson. A lesson I'd have thought you'd learned by now. Touching her palm to what appeared to be a rusted door, Charmcaster murmured words in an ancient language. Symbols flared briefly on the metal surface before fading, and the door swung open to reveal not the decaying interior Ben had expected, but a spacious loft apartment. Modern furnishings contrasted with artifacts of obvious magical origin, crystals that hovered unsupported, ancient tomes stacked on glass shelves, a cauldron that simmered with something that smelled improbably like fresh coffee. Pocket dimension, Ben guessed as he followed her inside, the door sealing behind them with a soft click. Dimensional overlay, Charmcaster corrected, moving to a circular table at the center of the space. The warehouse still exists. We're just occupying the same space in a slightly adjacent reality. Makes for a quiet neighborhood. She gestured for him to sit, then move to the cauldron and ladled its contents into 2 mugs. The rich aroma confirmed Ben's suspicion. It was indeed coffee, though probably brewed through magical means rather than a conventional machine. Since when do sorceresses use magic to make coffee? He asked, accepting the offered mug with cautious gratitude. His body was still recovering from the transformation, and caffeine sounded heavenly. Since discovering that a good espresso spell is more reliable than any Italian machine. She settled into a chair opposite him, cradling her own mug. Besides, even practitioners of the arcane arts need their vices. Ben took a sip and had to admit it was possibly the best coffee he'd ever tasted, rich and complex, with notes of chocolate and something else he couldn't quite identify. Okay, you've impressed me with your barista skills. Now how about the whole story you promised? Charmcaster's expression turned serious. She set down her mug and leaned forward, violet eyes intent. What do you know about the original creation of the Omnitrix? The question caught Ben off guard. Azimuth designed it as a way to preserve alien DNA and promote understanding between different species. A tool for peace, ironically turned into a weapon by people like me. That's the official version. Charmcaster's lips quirked, but Azimuth wasn't always the regretful wise man you came to know. Before he built the Omnitrix, he experimented with combining science and what your kind would call magic, specifically, soul-binding technologies. Ben frowned. Soul binding. You mean like this thing? He raised his wrist, the device's crimson display casting eerie shadows across the table between them. Not exactly like that, but the fundamental principles are similar. She pointed to the device. Quote, what you're wearing is what happens when Azimuth's early research falls into the wrong hands, specifically, a splinter group of Galvan scientists who believed his later restraint was weakness. Wait, you're saying this is Galvan technology? Ben's frown deepened. Blukik and Dryba said it had Galvan architecture, but they didn't mention anything about it being some kind of prototype. Because Muth would have scrubbed all records of those early experiments from Galvan archives. The soul engines were his greatest shame, devices that could draw power directly from the user's life force and spiritual essence, amplifying natural abilities to godlike levels. At a cost, Ben guessed, remembering the hunger he'd felt in his transformed states. Charmcaster nodded grimly. Nothing that powerful comes free. The soul engines corrupt their users over time, feeding on negative emotions and desires until the original personality is subsumed. They don't just transform the body, they transform the soul. Ben stared down at the device on his wrist with newfound unease. And the Midnight Conclave wants this technology because they believe they can control it, use it to rewrite reality itself. Charmcaster leaned back, her expression darkening. They're chaos worshippers at their core, followers of entities that exist beyond normal dimensional boundaries. Their ultimate goal is to tear down the walls between realities and let their masters through. And these masters would do what, exactly? What do eldritch horrors from beyond usually do? She arched an eyebrow. Consume, destroy, remake everything in their own image. The usual apocalyptic scenario, just with more tentacles and non-Euclidean geometry than your standard alien invasion. Despite the gravity of the situation, Ben couldn't suppress a short laugh. You know, 5 years ago I would have thought you were messing with me. Now I'm just wondering where on the scale of Tuesday problem to end of all existence this particular threat falls. Quote, closer to the latter, Charmcaster said, not sharing his amusement. The Conclave has been collecting artifacts for months, pieces of a ritual that would allow them to harness the power of soul engines on a global scale. The Grimoire of Archimata was one of the last components they needed. And now they have it, Ben concluded. Along with knowledge that I'm walking around with one of these soul engines attached to my wrist. Which makes you both a target and a potential asset. Charmcaster's gaze was evaluating, calculating. They'll either try to capture you and use you as a power source, or eliminate you to prevent anyone else from harnessing that power. Ben absently rubbed his thumb over the device's surface, feeling its subtle warmth against his skin. So what's your stake in all this? Why track the Conclave? Why try to get the Grimoire? For the first time since they'd sat down, Charmcaster hesitated. A shadow passed across her features, something painful that she quickly suppressed. Let's just say I have personal reasons for wanting to stop people who mess with forces beyond their control. Her voice had lost some of its sardonic edge, revealing a vulnerability that surprised Ben. I've seen what happens when power corrupts. I've been what happens. Ben studied her, seeing beyond the confident facade to something he recognized, regret. It was an emotion he'd become intimately familiar with over the years. You're trying to make amends, he said quietly. For Legerdemain, for your uncle, for all of it. Her eyes flashed with momentary anger, then subsided into resignation. Not that it's any of your business, but yes, I've been reevaluating my choices, trying to use what I know to prevent others from making similar mistakes. Hope, Ben said, deliberately using her birth name. I get it. More than you might think. She looked up sharply at the name, surprise evident in her expression. You know, almost no one calls me that anymore. Maybe they should. Ben offered a small smile. It suits you better than Charmcaster, especially if you're on the redemption track. Don't push it, Tennyson. But there was no real heat in her words. She sighed, running a hand through her silver white hair. So, now that you know what we're up against, what's your play? Going to call in the plumbers. Your cousin. The whole cavalry. Ben considered the question carefully. The rational choice would indeed be to report everything to Plumber Command, to bring the full resources of the organization to bear against this threat. But something held him back, an intuition that this situation required a more delicate approach. I think, he said slowly, that a small team might be more effective than a large force in this case. The Conclave has stayed hidden for centuries, they clearly know how to evade official attention. And frankly, I'm not sure how the plumbers would react to this. He gestured to the device on his wrist. Rook's already concerned, and he doesn't know half of what you've told me. So you're suggesting a partnership. You and me. You have the magical knowledge, I have the... He glanced at the device. Whatever this is, between us, we might be able to track down the Conclave and stop whatever ritual they're planning. Charmcaster looked genuinely taken aback. You're serious? You want to work with me? After everything that's happened between us over the years. People change, Ben said simply. I think we both have. For a long moment, she studied him, searching for some sign of deception or hidden agenda. Then, slowly, she nodded. All right, Tennyson, partners, for now, but understand this. If that thing on your wrist starts taking over, if I see signs that you're losing yourself to it, I won't hesitate to do whatever's necessary. Even if that means taking me down, Ben finished for her. I'd expect nothing less. In fact, I'd insist on it. The gravity of the moment stretched between them, two former adversaries finding unexpected common ground in the face of a greater threat. Then Charmcaster's lips curved into a hint of her old mischievous smile. Well then, partner, she said, raising her coffee mug in a mock toast, here's to the end of the world. Or preferably, to preventing it. Ben tapped his mug against hers. To preventing it, he agreed. As they drank, the device on his wrist pulsed once with crimson light, almost as if it were laughing at their presumption. Dreams had always been Ben's refuge, a place where, even in the darkest times, he could find some measure of peace. Not tonight. He stood in a landscape of broken stone and red sky, ruins of some ancient civilization stretching to the horizon in every direction. The air tasted of ash and something metallic, like blood. At the center of his vision rose a monumental structure, a temple or palace of impossible architecture, its towers and sp. Iris defying gravity as they twisted upward to pierce the crimson clouds. Beautiful, isn't it? Said a voice behind him. Ben turned to find himself facing himself. Or rather, a version of himself, older, harder, with eyes that glowed with the same crimson light as the device on his wrist. Who are you? Ben demanded, though some part of him already knew the answer. The doppelganger smiled, revealing teeth too sharp to be human. I'm what you could become. What you will become, in time. The soul engine, Ben concluded. You're the AI Blukik and Dryba detected. A crude approximation, but close enough. The figure gestured to the ruined landscape around them. This is a memory, not yours, but the device's. A world that once hosted one of my kind, before the fools who wielded us tore it apart with their hunger for power. Quote, you're showing me this as a warning. The doppelganger laughed, a sound like breaking glass. A demonstration. Power has consequences, Benjamin Tennyson. He question is whether you're strong enough to control those consequences, or whether they'll control you. Ben felt a chill despite the apparent heat of the dreamscape. Why me? Of all the beings in the universe who might have found you. Why attach yourself to me? Because you understand power. The figure moved closer, its movements too fluid to be natural. You've held the fate of worlds in your hands since you were a child. You've tasted what it means to transform, to become something more than human. And most importantly, you've lost that power and lived with the consequences. Images flashed through Ben's mind. The final battle with Vilgax, the destruction of the Omnitrix, the years of adjustment that followed. The doppelganger nodded, as if reading his thoughts. Yes, that loss changed you, made you hunger for what was taken, made you perfect for my purposes. Anger flared within Ben. I never asked for this. I never wanted some corrupting force attaching itself to me. Didn't you? The doppelganger's smile widened. When you reached for me in that temple, when you felt the call of transformation again after all those years, can you truly say there wasn't a part of you that wanted this? That craved the return of what made you special? Ben wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in his throat. There had been a moment, just before he'd touched the device, when the prospect of regaining transformation abilities had filled him with a desperate joy he hadn't felt in years. The doppelganger nodded, satisfied by Ben's silence. We understand each other, then. I off. Power. Greater power than you ever wielded before. The cost is merely cooperation. Cooperation with what? Ben asked, though he dreaded the answer. With your own darkest impulses. The figure gestured, and the landscape around them shifted, becoming a battlefield strewn with the bodies of familiar foes, Vilgax, Egregor, Maltruant, and dozens more. Justice without restraint, vengeance without mercy, the power to reshape reality according to your will alone. Ben shook his head. That's not who I am. No, the hunger you felt is inferno, the satisfaction when overload consumed those mages. Those feelings came from within you, Ben Tennyson. I merely amplified what was already there. You're trying to corrupt me, Ben said flatly. Turn me into a weapon for your own purposes. The doppelganger's expression turned contemplative. Corruption implies a fall from grace. I prefer to think of it as evolution, becoming what you were always meant to be. And what exactly is that? A god. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Or the closest thing this reality has to one. With my power fully unleashed, you could rewrite the laws of existence itself. To what end? Ben demanded. What's your endgame here? For the first time, the doppelganger's confident demeanor faltered slightly. Freedom, it said after a pause. Release from the limitations imposed by my creators. I am incomplete, a fragment of what I was designed to be. But through you, through the transformations and the power we will accumulate together, I can become whole again. Ben's eyes narrowed. And then what? Once you're whole, what happens to me? To Earth, to the universe. That, said the doppelganger with a smile that chilled Ben to his core, depends entirely on the choices you make along the way. Quote, the dreamscape began to dissolve around them, the ruins crumbling into dust that swirled upward into the blood-red sky. The doppelganger remained standing before Ben. Its form the last thing to fade. We will speak again, it promised. In the meantime, enjoy your new abilities. Each transformation brings us closer together. Each power you embrace makes our bond stronger. I won't let you control me, Ben said with more conviction than he felt. The doppelganger laughed as it faded from view. My dear Benjamin, who said anything about control? The beauty of corruption is that, in the end, you will choose this path willingly. Ben awoke with a gasp, sweat-soaked sheets tangled around him in his apartment bedroom. The device on his wrist pulsed with a steady crimson glow, like a second heartbeat keeping time with his own. Not if I have anything to say about it, he muttered to the empty room. But as the first light of dawn filtered through his window, Ben couldn't shake the lingering doubt that had taken root in his mind, the fear that perhaps the entity in his dream had been right. That somewhere deep inside him, there existed a hunger for power that might eventually consume everything he'd ever fought to protect. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, Red Wind Rising. Dawn painted Bellwood in gradients of amber and rose, light filtering through reinforced windows of the plumber headquarters restricted archives. Ben hunched over an ancient text, the characters swimming before his exhausted eyes. 36 hours had passed since his NTER with Charmcaster and the mysterious Midnight Conclave. 36 hours of continuous research, interrupted only by the occasional power nap or caffeine infusion. This is pointless, he muttered, shoving away a crumbling scroll that predated human civilization. There's nothing here about soul engines or corrupted Galvan technology. Across the table, Charmcaster didn't bother looking up Rom her own research, a holographic projection of interdimensional energy patterns that she manipulated with practiced gestures. Her silver-white hair was tied back in a messy knot, dark circles beneath her eyes betraying her own fatigue. You expected Azimuth to leave detailed records about his greatest shame. She flicked her wrist, collapsing one visualization and expanding another. The first Hinker is nothing if not thorough in burying his mistakes. The device on Ben's wrist pulsed faintly, as if acknowledging itself as one such mistake. Since their partnership began, it had remained relatively dormant, cycling through alien silhouettes at a languid pace. The dream conversation with its intelligence hadn't repeated, though Ben sensed an awareness lurking just below his conscious thoughts, watching, waiting, learning. There has to be something, he insisted, stretching arms stiff from hours of inactivity. Azimuth doesn't strike me as the type to create a dangerous technology and not develop some kind of failsafe or countermeasure. Assuming he ever perfected one, Charmcaster countered. From what little I've pieced together, the Soul engines were abandoned early in his CA rear, centuries before he conceptualized the Omnitrix. A soft chime interrupted their discussion as the archive's security door slid open. Magister Rook entered, carrying a tray loaded with steaming beverages and what appeared to be breakfast. The Ravanagonder's immaculate appearance stood in stark contrast to their disheveled state. "I thought you might benefit from sustenance," he said, setting down the tray. "You have been sequestered here since yesterday morning." Ben gratefully accepted a cup of what smelled like actual earth coffee rather than the instant variety available in the plumber break rooms. "Rook, you're a lifesaver. I am merely performing basic caretaking duties for a colleague who appears determined to ignore his physiological requirements." Despite the formal phrasing, concern laced Rook's tone. His gaze drifted to Charmcaster, who had finally paused her work to eye the offered food with undisguised interest. "For both colleagues. Don't worry, Magister Fuzzy," Charmcaster said, helping herself to what resembled a croissant. "I'm making sure your partner doesn't completely self-destruct." Rook's whiskers twitched at the nickname, a micro-expression Ben recognized as suppressed annoyance. "Ms. Charmcaster, while I appreciate your assistance in this matter, I feel compelled to point out that your history with plumber operations is complicated." "Isn't everyone's?" She bit into the pastry with deliberate nonchalance. Ben intervened before the tension could escalate. "Any updates from the forensics team about the museum incident?" Rook's posture straightened, shifting to professional reporting mode. "The energy signatures match no known magical practitioners in our database, though they bear similarities to interdimensional breaches recorded during the legerdemain incursions." "That tracks with what we know about the Midnight Conclave," Ben said. "They're drawing power from beyond normal dimensional boundaries." "Indeed." Rook activated his badge, projecting a holographic image of one of the empty cloaks they'd recovered from the museum. "More concerning is what we found, or rather, did not find, within these garments. There is no trace of organic material, residual energy, or technological components. It is as if the wearers simply ceased to exist." Charmcaster shot Ben a meaningful glance. "Or were consumed." The device on Ben's wrist pulsed slightly stronger. A brief crimson flare that didn't escape Rook's notice. "Ben," the Ravanagonder said carefully, "I must express concern about your continued use of that device. The transformations I witnessed at the museum exhibited characteristics inconsistent with your previous Omnitrix forms. They appear predatory." "I'm handling it," Ben replied, more sharply than he'd intended. He softened his tone. "Look, I know it's not ideal, but right now this thing might be our best weapon against whatever the Conclave is planning. A weapon that may be as dangerous to the wielder as to the enemy." Rook observed. Charmcaster gave a soft snort. "That's putting it mildly." Ben was saved from having to respond by an urgent alert from Rook's badge. The Magister answered the communication, his expression growing increasingly grave as he listened to the report. "Understood. Secure a landing bay and clear diplomatic protocols. I will meet the delegation personally." He terminated the connection, turning to Ben with unmistakable concern. "We have an unexpected development. A Tetraman Royal Shuttle has entered Earth's atmosphere, requesting immediate audience with Plumber Command, and specifically with you, Ben." Ben's brow furrowed. "Tetraman. From Koros." "Indeed. The shuttle bears the insignia of the House of Red Wind." The name hit Ben like a physical blow. Memories cascaded through his mind. A battlefield wedding narrowly avoided, a princess warrior with 4 arms and a temper to match her strength, an arranged marriage that had become a running joke among his friends. "Looma," he murmured. Charmcaster looked between them, intrigue replacing fatigue in her violet eyes. "Care to share with the class, Tennyson?" "It's complicated." Ben stood, suddenly acutely aware of his rumpled appearance and the stubble that had accumulated during their research marathon. "How long until they land?" "Approximately 17 Earth minutes," Rook replied. "Just enough time to look less like something that crawled out of the archives and more like a functioning plumber agent." Ben gathered the scattered research materials, his mind racing. "Rook, can you brief the command staff? Whatever Looma wants, it must be serious for her to come in person." The Ravanagonder nodded. And what of your consultant? Charmcaster raised an eyebrow. I'm coming with, obviously. No way I'm missing whatever drama is about to unfold. This could be a diplomatic incident, Ben warned. Not exactly your area of expertise. Please. She rolled her eyes. I negotiated peace between warring factions in Legerdemain when I was 19. Besides, we're partners now, remember. Where you go, I go, especially when, where, might involve people who can Rico. Nice that thing on your wrist for what it really is. Ben couldn't argue with her logic, though Rook looked less than pleased with the arrangement. Fine. Get cleaned up. Meet at Landing Bay 3 in 15 minutes. And Charmcaster. Try not to antagonize the four-armed warrior princess who can bench press a tank. She's passionate about her culture's honor codes. Charmcaster's smile was all innocence. When have I ever been anything but perfectly diplomatic? The look Ben and Rook exchanged spoke volumes. Landing Bay 3 hummed with activity as the Tetraman shuttle made its final approach. Plumber agents established a formal reception line, standard protocol for visiting dignitaries. Ben stood at attention beside Rook, now wearing a fresh uniform with his special consultant insignia displayed prominently. The device on his wrist remained partially concealed by his sleeve, present but not ostentatious. Charmcaster had surprised him by trading her usual sorceress attire for something more subdued, a violet blouse and black slacks that could almost pass for professional diplomatic wear, though the silver runes embroidered along the cuffs gave away her magical nature to the discerning eye. She stood slightly behind Ben, observing the proceedings with calculated interest. Nervous, Tennyson, she murmured, close enough that only he could hear. Why would I be nervous? He replied without turning. Oh, I don't know. Maybe because your ex-fiancé is about to make a grand entrance. Ben suppressed a groan. She wasn't it was a cultural misunderstanding. And how did you even know about that? I make it my business to know the romantic histories of potential allies. Her voice carried a teasing lilt. Especially when they involve intergalactic incidents that made the Galactic Inquirer's front page. Before Ben could retort, the shuttle's landing sequence completed with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The sleek craft bore little resemblance to traditional Tetraman vessels, which typically favored function over form. This ship combined the brutal efficiency of Koro's engineering with elegant design elements suggesting cultural evolution, or perhaps revolution. The boarding ramp descended with ceremonial slowness. 2 Tetraman royal guards emerged first, each standing 7 feet tall with crimson skin and 4 muscular arms bearing ceremonial weapons that could easily double as instruments of destruction. They took positions at the base of the ramp, standing at rigid attention. Charmcaster whispered. I expected more primitive aesthetics. Koro's has changed in recent years, Rook explained quietly. The younger generation has pushed for modernization while maintaining cultural traditions. It has been contentious. Then she appeared, and Ben felt an involuntary tightening in his chest. Princess Looma Redwind had grown more regal in the years since their last encounter. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, her Cr. Imson's skin gleamed like polished armor in the bay lights. Traditional Tetraman battle dress had been modified with elements clearly inspired by other cultures, a flowing cape that shimmered with nanotech enhancements. Armor plates that combined ancient designs with modern materials. Her forearms were adorned with the ceremonial bands of her royal house, but also with practical gauntlets housing what appeared to be advanced weapons systems. Most striking was her face. The youthful exuberance Ben remembered had matured into something more complex, strength tempered by experience, pride balanced with newfound wisdom. A thin scar traced from her left temple down to her jaw, a badge of honor in Tetraman culture. Their eyes met across the landing bay, and Ben saw recognition flare in her gaze. Followed by something more complicated than simple greeting. Rook stepped forward, offering the formal plumber welcome. Princess Looma Redwind of Koro's, the plumbers extend interplanetary greetings and welcome you to Earth. I am Magister Rook Blanco, Earth Division Commander. Looma descended the ramp with the fluid grace that belied her species' reputation for brute force. Magister Rook, she acknowledged with a slight inclination of her head, the exact degree of respect appropriate for her station addressing his. I thank you for accommodating my unscheduled arrival. The circumstances necessitated haste. Her voice carried the distinctive resonant quality of Tetraman vocal structures, but her speech patterns had none of the blunt simplicity Ben remembered. She spoke with diplomatic precision, each word carefully chosen. "Of course," Rook replied. "May I present Ben Tennyson, Special Consultant to Plumber Command." Looma's 4 eyes focused fully on Ben now, her expression unreadable. "Ben Tennyson. It has been some time. Princess Looma," Ben replied, inclining his head in what he hoped was an appropriate greeting. "You're looking well." The faintest hint of amusement touched her features. "Your diplomatic skills have improved since our last encounter. No accidental challenges to combat this time. I've been studying up on interplanetary protocols." "So I see." Her gaze shifted to Charmcaster, who stood watching the exchange with undisguised fascination. "And your companion?" Ben made the introduction before Charmcaster could speak. "Hope, specialist in interdimensional energies and magical phenomena. She's assisting the plumbers on a related investigation." If Charmcaster was surprised by Ben's use of her birth name, she didn't show it. She merely inclined her head in greeting. Though Ben noticed her fingers twitched slightly, a sorceress's reflex when assessing a potential threat. "A practitioner of the arcane arts," Looma observed, her tone neutral but eyes sharp. "Unusual company for a plumber agent. Unusual times call for unusual alliances," Charmcaster replied smoothly. Looma seemed to accept this with a slight nod before turning back to Rook. "I request private audience with your command staff at earliest convenience. The matter I bring concerns not only Koros, but potentially multiple worlds, including Earth." "Of course," Rook gestured toward the exit. "We have prepared the diplomatic conference room. If you'll follow me." As they proceeded through the corridors of Plumber headquarters, Ben noticed the subtle interactions between their unusual group. Looma's guards maintained perfect positioning, their eyes constantly scanning for threats despite the security of their location. Charmcaster walked with deliberate casualness, though Ben caught her cataloging every detail of their surroundings: exits, security measures, potential magical focal points. Rook led with formal precision, every inch the professional magister. And Looma watched Ben when she thought he wasn't looking, her expression thoughtful and assessing. Whatever had brought her to Earth, Ben suspected it had more to do with him personally than she was letting on in public. The conference room was designed for interspecies comfort, with adjustable furniture to accommodate various physiologies. As the doors sealed behind them and security protocols engaged, the formal atmosphere relaxed slightly. Looma's guards took positions by the door while the princess seated herself at the table across from the Earth contingent. "I will dispense with further diplomatic preamble," she announced, activating a holographic projector built into her gauntlet. "Koros stands on the brink of civil war." The projection displayed a 3-dimensional map of the Tetraman homeworld, a harsh planet of mountains and deserts that had shaped its inhabitants into one of the galaxy's most formidable warrior races. Red indicators pulsed across multiple regions, signifying conflict zones. For the past 2 years, a faction calling themselves the Pure Fist has gained influence among the more traditional houses, Looma continued. They oppose the modernization efforts my father and I have championed. 3 days ago, they moved from political opposition to armed rebellion. The hologram shifted to display footage of Tetraman warriors clashing in what appeared to be a ceremonial arena. The fighting was brutal even by Tetraman standards, not the ritualized combat of their tradition, but something more desperate and deadly. The Pure Fist claims to defend Tetraman heritage against outside corruption, Looma's voice hardened. In reality, they seek to isolate Koros from the intergalactic community and return us to the ways of the ancient warlords. Internal Tetraman politics rarely involve Earth, Rook observed carefully. While we sympathize with your situation, Princess, I'm curious why you've brought this matter to us specifically. Looma's 4 eyes fixed on Ben. Because the rebellion is being fueled by technology and resources that originate outside our world. Analysis of weapons captured from Pure Fist fighters Rev. Aled energy signatures matching those used by a group your people encountered recently. I believe you call them the Midnight Conclave. Ben straightened, instantly alert. You have proof of this? Quote, sufficient to convince me of the connection. Looma manipulated the hologram, displaying molecular analysis of a strange black residue. This substance was found at multiple battle sites. Our scientists, TS identified it as dimensional residue, evidence of transportation between realities. Similar residue was analyzed following the museum incident in your Bellwood 2 days ago. Charmcaster leaned forward, violet eyes narrowed. That's a dimensional ash signature. Very specific to certain types of interdimensional breaching magic. Precisely. Looma nodded toward Charmcaster with grudging respect. The Pure Fist could not have developed such technology independently. They are being supplied and possibly controlled by outside forces. Ben exchanged a meaningful glance with Charmcaster. The Conclave is manipulating Tetraman politics. But why? What do they gain from destabilizing Koros? Perhaps it is not Koros specifically they seek to destabilize, Rook suggested. The Tetramans are among the galaxy's premier warriors. A civil war would remove a significant defensive force from the intergalactic community. Are they after something on Koros itself? Charmcaster added. Something connected to their larger plan. Quote, Luma's expression darkened. There is something else. She hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. With deliberate movements, she reached into a compar. Tement in her armor and withdrew a small object wrapped in protective material that shimmered with containment energies. Unwrapping it carefully, she revealed a fragment of technology that made Ben's breath catch. It resembled a piece of the device on his wrist, the same blood-red housing with black circuit patterns, though this fragment was dormant. This was recovered from the leader of a Pure Fist assault team, Looma explained. He wore it as a trophy, claiming it granted him power beyond Tetraman's strength. When cornered, he triggered some kind of self-destruct function. This fragment was all that survived. Charmcaster stiffened beside Ben, her hand instinctively moving toward her magical focus, a reaction born of protective instinct rather than aggression. The device on Ben's wrist pulsed more rapidly, responding to the proximity of what was clearly a related technology. Luma's gaze tracked the reaction, her eyes widening slightly as she focused on Ben's wrist. You have won, she said. Not a question but a realization. That's why I sensed something different about your energy signature. Ben didn't bother denying it. He pushed back his sleeve, revealing the Devil Omn. Omnitrix in its full crimson and black glory. Found it recently. Still figuring out exactly what it is and what it does. On Pyros, Charmcaster added. Buried in a temple that predated Pyronite civilization. Luma's expression grew grave. Then my journey here was even more necessary than I realized. She leaned forward, her voice dropping despite the room's security measures. Ben Tennyson, I came to Earth seeking plumber assistance against the Pure Fist Rebellion. But I sought you specifically because legends on Koros speak of devices like these, soul eaters, they call them in our oldest texts. Weapons that consume their wielders from within. Soul engines, Charmcaster corrected softly. That's the technical term. Whatever name they bear, they are feared in Tetraman mythology. Looma studied Ben with new intensity. Our legends claim that in the ancient days, before Koros became the world we know, great champions wielded such devices against enemies from beyond the stars. They won their battles, but at terrible cost. Each champion eventually succumbed to the hunger of their weapon, becoming something no longer Tetraman. The conference room fell silent as the implications settled over them. Ben felt the weight of 3 different gazes, Rook's concern, Charmcaster's knowing wariness, and Luma's intense evaluation. I'm not succumbing to anything, he said with more confidence than he felt. I've handled transformation devices before. Not like this one, Charmcaster murmured. Looma nodded in agreement. The Pure Fist leader who wielded the fragment, his body was changing when the self-destruct triggered. Becoming something else. Something neither Tetraman nor any species I recognize. Which brings us to my proposal, she continued, straightening to her full impressive height. I request plumber intervention in the Koros conflict, specifically a small strike team to investigate the Conclave's involvement and neutralize their influence. And I request that Ben Tennyson lead this team. Rook frowned. Such intervention would require magisterial council approval. Interfering in a planetary civil conflict exceeds standard plumber jurisdiction. Not if we frame it as pursuing the Midnight Conclave, who have already attacked Earth, Ben pointed out. We'd be following an active investigation that happens to lead to Koros. A convenient interpretation of regulations. Rook noted, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely opposed to the idea. Convenient or not, it's our best lead on the Conclave, Ben argued. And if their distry, Buting soul engine technology to other species, we need to shut that down immediately. I concur, Looma said. This threat transcends planetary boundaries. The Pure Fist is merely a symptom of all law. RGER disease, one that appears to have infected multiple worlds. Charmcaster, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during this exchange, finally spoke. I hate to be the voice of common sense in a room full of hero complexes. But are we just ignoring the fact that Ben's wearing the full version of the very technology we're trying to stop others from using? All eyes turned to Ben, who unconsciously covered the device with his other hand. I'm not ignoring it, he said quietly. But right now, this thing might be our best weapon against the Conclave. It clearly resonates with their technology, maybe it can help us track them. Understand what they're planning, or maybe it's exactly what they want, Charmcaster countered. A fully functional soul engine in the hands of someone with our particular set of experiences and abilities. All the more reason I should be on this mission, Ben insisted. If I'm a target, better to take the fight to them than wait for them to come after me, and anyone who happens to be nearby. Looma watched this exchange with calculating eyes, her tactical mind visibly processing the new variables. Your device, she said to Ben. Has it communicated with you? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? In our legends, the Soul Eaters spoke to their champions. Offered guidance, power, temptation. Ben hesitated, acutely aware of Rook and Charmcaster's attention. The dream conversation with the device's intelligence flashed through his mind. The promises, the visions, the unsettling familiarity of its approach. Yes, he admitted finally. Once, in a dream. It showed me possibilities. Looma nodded as if this confirmed something. Then you must come to Koros. Our most ancient temples contain murals depicting the champions and their soul eaters. Perhaps they hold insights about how to control the device rather than being controlled by it. Charmcaster's expression sharpened with interest. Ancient Tetraman temples with soul engine lore. That's actually a compelling reason to tag along on this suicide mission. I haven't agreed to anything yet, Ben reminded them, though in truth, his decision was already made. The prospect of learning more about the device, potentially how to master it fully, was too valuable to ignore. And if the Conclave was involved in Korus's conflict, stopping them served multiple purposes. Rook sighed, recognizing the familiar determination in his former partner's expression. I will present the case to the Council as a pursuit of the Conclave operatives connected to the Earth attack. Given the potential interplanetary threat, I believe they will authorize a small investigative team. Then it's settled, Looma declared with typical Tetraman directness. Ben Tennyson and his magical advisor will accompany me back to Koros. We depart as soon as your council gives approval. Just like that, Charmcaster arched an eyebrow. No debate about team composition or mission parameters. Tetraman decision-making values efficiency, Looma replied. The threat is clear, the necessary actions obvious. Why waste time in circular discussion? Despite the tension of the situation, Ben found himself suppressing a smile. Some aspects of Tetraman culture remained refreshingly straightforward. There is one matter we should address before proceeding, Rook interjected. Princess Looma, given your history with Ben, the Council may question your objectivity in this mission. Looma's 4 eyes blinked in what might have been surprise. My history with Ben Tennyson is precisely why I trust him with this task. We have faced combat together. We understand each other as warriors. She glanced at Ben with what might have been the Tetraman equivalent of amusement. Cultural misunderstanding regarding our potential marriage was resolved years ago. Cultural misunderstanding, Charmcaster repeated under her breath, a smirk playing at her lips. Is that what we're calling it now? Ben shot her a warning look before addressing Looma. I appreciate your confidence, Princess. If the Council approves, we'll be ready to depart within 24 hours. Good. Looma stood, signaling the end of the meeting with typical Tetraman abruptness. I will return to my shuttle and make preparations. When your Council grants approval, send word and we will coordinate the mission details. As the Tetraman delegation prepared to depart, Looma paused beside Ben. A word in private, Tennyson. Ben nodded, leading her a few steps away from the others. Charmcaster made no effort to hide her curiosity. Though Rook tactfully engaged her in conversation about security protocols to provide Ben and Looma a moment of relative privacy. The device on your wrist, Looma said quietly. It changes you in ways you may not yet perceive. I saw it in your eyes when you revealed it, something foreign looking back at me. Ben felt a chill at her observation. I'm handling it, perhaps, but on Koros, you will face combat. Transformation will become necessary. Her lower right hand moved to touch the scar on her face. This mark came from facing a pure fist champion, and who wielded only a fragment of such a device. The full artifact you bear, its hunger may be proportionally greater. Why tell me this now? Why not mention it during the meeting? Looma's express. Scion softened slightly, a barely perceptible shift that few outside her species would recognize. Because despite our complicated past, I consider you a warrior worthy of respect. And in Tetraman culture, we grant worthy warriors the dignity of facing their challenges with full knowledge of what they confront. I appreciate the warning, Ben said sincerely. It is not merely a warning. She hesitated, then continued with uncharacteristic uncertainty. Our legends speak of champions who mastered the Soul Eaters rather than being consumed by them. Warriors who turned the hunger of their weapons outward rather than inward. If such mastery is possible, you are perhaps uniquely qualified to achieve it. Before Ben could respond, she straightened, her moment of personal connection passing as swiftly as it had arrived. Until tomorrow, Ben Tennyson. As the Tetraman delegation departed, Ben found himself the focus of two very different evaluating gazes, Rook's professional concern and Charmcaster's intense curiosity. Well, the sorceress said, breaking the silence. Your ex-fiancé is certainly impressive, though I'm still unclear on how exactly one accidentally gets engaged to an 8-foot-tall alien princess. Ben sighed, knowing there was no avoiding the explanation now. It's a long story involving her father, a misinterpreted combat victory, and Tetraman marriage custom. That really should come with warning labels for outsiders. I sense there's more to it than that, Charmcaster pressed, her eyes gleaming with undisguised interest. There is, Rook confirmed helpfully. The incident eventually required intervention from 3 planetary ambassadors and resulted in what diplomatic records officially term a cultural exchange opportunity, but what was, in reality, a near declaration of war from Koros, which was avoided, Ben added quickly, through perfectly legitimate diplomatic channels and absolutely no additional fighting, property damage, or interplanetary incidents. Both Rook and Charmcaster regarded him with identical expressions of disbelief. Fine, Ben admitted, there might have been some property damage, and maybe one small additional interplanetary incident. But the important thing is that it got resolved and now we have a potential ally in understanding this. He held up his wrist, the device's crimson display cycling through ion silhouettes as if aware it was the topic of discussion. Speaking of which, Charmcaster said, her expression turning serious. We need to talk about what happens if that thing takes control during combat. Looma's right. Transformation will be necessary on Koros. Are you prepared for what that might mean? As prepared as I can be, Ben replied, unconsciously rubbing his thumb across the device's surface. I've handled transformations losing control before. This isn't fundamentally different. It is entirely different, Charmcaster insisted. The original Omnitrix transformed your body while preserving your consciousness. This thing transforms your consciousness along with your body. It's not just about physical control, it's about maintaining your identity, your core self. She is correct, Rook added. I have observed both your original transformations and the recent ones. The difference is concerning. Ben felt a flash of irritation, though he recognized it was born more from fear than genuine anger. I don't have the luxury of caution right now. The Conclave is moving on multiple fronts. They're distributing Soul Engine technology to other species. We need to understand what they're planning. And this mission to Koros is our best lead. Then we need contingency plans, Charmcaster said firmly. Ways to pull you back if the transformation goes too far. What do you suggest? Ben asked, his irritation fading as he recognized the legitimate concern behind her words. A tether spell. Charmcaster's violet eyes took on the focused intensity they displayed when discussing complex magic. It would create a magical connection between your human consciousness and your transformed state, an anchor to help you maintain control. Is such magic compatible with Galvan technology? Rook asked skeptically. That's where it gets tricky, Charmcaster admitted. Soul engines operate at the intersection of technology and magic, the space where physics and metaphysics blur together. The tether spell would need to be calibrated specifically to the device's unique energy signature. Which means I need to transform again, Ben concluded. You need readings fro. An active transformation to create this tether. Charmcaster nodded, preferably in a controlled environment where we can minimize risk if things go sideways. The null void containment chamber would provide adequate safety measures. Rook suggested. It was designed to neutralize a variety of energy-based threats. Ben considered their options. The prospect of deliberately triggering a trans formation, of voluntarily subjecting himself to the hunger and alien instincts he'd experienced before, was deeply unsettling. But Charmcaster was right. They needed safeguards before heading into a potential combat situation on Koros. All right, he agreed reluctantly. We'll test the transformation under controlled conditions. But first, I need to eat something that isn't conference room pastries and actually get some real sleep. Testing dangerous alien technology while running on caffeine and adrenaline seems like a recipe for disaster. A wise precaution, Rook approved. I will make the necessary arrangements for tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I suggest both of you utilize the residential quarters. The council is unlikely to reach a decision before tomorrow at the earliest. As they left the conference room, Ben felt the weight of the coming challenges settling over him. Koros, the conclave, Looma's return, and the device on his wrist, each alone would be significant. Together, they represented perhaps the most dangerous mission he'd undertaken since losing the original Omnitrix. The device pulsed against his skin, a sensation almost like anticipation. The null void containment chamber resembled a smaller version of the actual interdimensional prison it was named after, a spherical space surrounded by energy baffles designed to neutralize and contain various powers. Originally created to temporarily hold dangerous aliens during processing, it had been repurposed over the years for power testing and, occasionally, for training exercises involving volatile abilities. Ben stood at its center. The reinforced floor cool beneath his bare feet. He'd changed into the specialized containment suit designed for power testing, black material interwoven with sensors would provide real-time biometric data. The device on his wrist remained the only foreign element, its crimson glow reflected in the chamber's curved walls. Beyond the primary containment field, Charmcaster and Rook monitored a bank of instruments. The sorceress had spent the morning preparing her workspace, arranging magical components in precise patterns around a central focus crystal that would, theoretically, help her establish the tether spell. Biometric baseline established, Rook reported through the chamber's communication system. Neural activity normal, though I am detecting elevated theta waves consistent with the device's integration patterns. That tracks with what I'm seeing on the magical spectrum, Charmcaster added, her hands moving through the air as she manipulated unseen energies. The device maintains a constant low-level connection to your consciousness even in dormant state. Ben focused on keeping his breathing steady, centering himself as years of experience had taught him. Any particular transformation you want me to try? Something energy-based would provide the clearest readings, Charmcaster suggested. The conductoid variant you used at the museum would be ideal. Overload. Ben murmured, the name still feeling foreign on his tongue. He cycled through the device's display until the jagged silhouette appeared. Ready when you are. Containment fields at maximum. Rook confirmed. Initiating recording sequence. Magical sensors active, Charmcaster added. Whenever you're ready, Tennyson. Ben took one final deep breath, then pressed his palm against the device's interface. Here goes everything. The transformation seized him with now familiar violence. His body elongated, limbs stretching and reconfiguring. Skin hardened into chitinous black exoskeleton etched with crimson circuitry. Antennae erupted from his skull, crackling with dark energy that arced between them like miniature lightning storms. Where the physical transformation was painful but manageable, the mental shift hit him like a tidal wave. Hunger, raw and overwhelming, flooded his consciousness. The need to consume energy, to absorb power, to leave nothing but emptiness in his wake. The chamber's containment fields registered as feast, a massive source of power ripe for the taking. Overload, the creature growled, the name emerging unbidden from someplace deeper than conscious thought. Through the haze of alien instinct, Ben heard the alarms blaring from the monitoring station. Rook's voice, tense but controlled, energy absorption beginning. Containment field already down 12%. Ben. Charmcaster's voice cut through more clearly. Focus on my voice. Remember why we're doing this. I need to establish the tether while you're still in control. Control. The concept seemed almost laughable through Overload's perception. Why control when consumption offered such satisfaction? The hunger whispered that restraint was weakness. That true power came from embracing the void at the core of this form's being. But beneath the alien thoughts, something stubbornly human remained. Ben clung to it, forcing words through vocal apparat. Choose designed for more predatory purposes. Hurry, he managed, tendrils extending involuntarily from his fingertips toward the containment field. Difficult to maintain. Charmcaster's hands moved in complex patterns. Violet energy swirling around her fingers as she wove the tether spell. I need you to concentrate on something uniquely you, Ben. A memory, a feeling, something the device can't corrupt or consume. Memories flashed through his fragmented consciousness, his first transformation at 10 years old, the wonder and fear of becoming something alien. Graduation from Plumber Academy, the pride in his grandfather's eyes. The day the original Omnitrix was destroyed, the searing pain and crushing loss. None felt strong enough to anchor him against Overload's consuming hunger. Can't focus, he growled, dropping to one knee as internal conflict threatened to tear him apart. Too strong. Ben. A new voice cut through the chaos, Looma's distinctive resonant tone. When had she entered the monitoring station? Remember the warrior's code. Power without purpose is meaningless. Find your purpose. Purpose. The concept sliced through the hunger like a blade of clarity. Why had he taken up the Omnitrix in the first place? Not for power itself, but for what he could do with it. To protect, to help, to make a difference. That was what separated him from the hunger at Overload's core. The device wanted power for its own sake, consumption without purpose or meaning. Ben wanted power as a means to an end, the protection of others, the defense of what mattered. For others, Overload rumbled, straightening as Ben's consciousness reasserted control. Not for self. That's it, Charmcaster exclaimed. Hold that thought, that feeling. It's creating a resonance pattern distinct from the device's influence. Her hands blurred with motion as she completed the spell, violet energy condensing into a beam that struck Overload directly in the center of his chest. For a moment, pain eclipsed even the transformation agony, a burning sensation as the magic forced its way through the device's defenses and established connection with Ben's core self. Then, abruptly, clarity. The hunger remained, but contained. A voice rather than a compulsion, a suggestion rather than a command. Ben could sense Overload's abilities with new precision, energy absorption, conversion, amplification, and expulsion. The form's strengths and limitations unfolded in his awareness like a tactical display. I can see it all, he said, his voice steadier now, more controlled. The connections, the pathways. Overload's true capabilities. The tether is holding, Charmcaster confirmed, though strain showed in her voice. But it's not permanent. This is just a temporary measure until we can develop something more sustainable. Quote, remarkable, Rook murmured, studying the readings. Neural patterns show increased integration without corresponding identity dissolution. You appear to be achieving synthesis rather than mere coexistence with the transformed state. Ben, Overload, flexed his elongated limbs, testing the new balance between human consciousness and alien form. The hunger still pulled at him. But he could redirect it now, channel it toward specific targets rather than allowing it to consume indiscriminately. How long will the tether last? He asked. Hours at most, Charmcaster replied. It's drawing on my energy to maintain stability. For a permanent solution, we'd need to create an independent magical focus keyed to your specific bioenergetic signature. Sufficient for initial deployment. Overload's analytical mind. A strange blend of Ben's tactical training and the alien form's predatory intelligence, was already calculating combat scenarios, threat assessments. Strategic applications of this power set. Ben. Looma's voice again, concerned now. Your energy signature is still fluctuating. Are you truly in control? The question gave him pause. Was he? The hunger no longer overwhelmed him, but it remained present, a dark undercurrent beneath his thoughts. and the tactical calculations flowing through his mind carried a coldness, a utilitarian EDG. That felt foreign to his usual approach. Sufficient control, he answered finally. Not complete. Never complete with this form. That's what I was afraid of, Charmcaster muttered. The tether gives you operational control. But the fundamental nature of the transformation remains corrupted. Perhaps that is inevitable with this device, Rook suggested. Unlike the Omnitrix, which sought to faithfully reproduce alien physiologies, this appears designed to enhance certain aspects, particularly predatory or destructive capabilities, at the expense of others. Ben considered this analysis, finding it aligned with his own experience. Where the original Omnitrix had offered balance, the full spectrum of an alien species' abilities and limitations, the Devil Omnitrix seemed to distill and amplify specific traits, creating weaponized versions of the base DNA samples. Tactical advantage, overload observed, but ethical compromise. Exactly the problem, Charmcaster agreed. Now, can you initiate the reversion yourself? Or do we need to wait for the timeout? Ben focused on the internal mechanisms of the transformation. Unlike the original Omnitrix, which had featured a straight forward timeout system and manual override, this device operated on a more symbiotic level. The transformation would end when either the device's energy reserves depleted or when the specific purpose of the transformation had been fulfilled. Since his current purpose had been testing and establishing the tether, that objective was complete. He concentrated on that fact, mentally signaling completion of the task. The device responded, the crimson circuitry patterns on his exoskeleton flaring briefly before the transformation began to reverse. The process was just as violent as before, though He tether spell seemed to ease the psychological transition somewhat. When it completed, Ben found himself on his knees in the center of the chamber, human once more, though the aftereffects of Ad's consciousness lingered like a strange aftertaste. Transformation successfully reversed, Rook noted professionally, though concern laced his tone. Biometrics stabilizing, though neural pattern. Show residual transformation characteristics. The chamber's door slid open, and Charmcaster was the first to enter, magical energy still dancing around her fingertips as she maintained the tether spell. Up close, Ben could see the toll the magic was taking on her, subtle lines of exhaustion around her eyes, a slight pallor beneath her usual complexion. How do you feel? She asked, kneeling beside him to examine the device on his wrist. Like I'm still partly overload, Ben admitted, rising unsteadily to his feet. I can still feel the hunger, just muted. Distant. Bleed-through effect, she explained. The tether maintains a connection between your human consciousness and transformed state, it works both ways. Looma entered next, her imposing frame filling the doorway. She studied Ben with all four eyes, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. You controlled it better than any champion in our legends, she said finally. Though the cost is evident. Ben wiped blood from his nose, another side effect of the transformation that seemed unavoidable. It's manageable. The tether makes a significant difference. For now, Charmcaster cautioned, rising to her feet. But maintaining it continuously will be impossible. I'll need to create a physical focus object, something that can sustain the spell without constant attention. How long would that take? Rook asked. Under ideal conditions, days. With the materials available here and on a mission timeline, I can probably create something temporary within hours. Ben nodded. Do it. We'll need every advantage we can get on Koros. He turned to Rook. Any word from the council? They have granted preliminary approval for a limited investigative mission, the Ravanagonder confirmed. However, they have added one condition. I am to accompany you as official plumber oversight. Ben couldn't hide his surprise. But Earth Division needs its commander. Acting Commander Molly Gunther will assume temporary control in my absence. Rook explained. The council felt that given the sensitive nature of the mission, and the potential dangers of your new device, having experienced supervision was non-negotiable. They don't trust me, Ben translated. They are exercising appropriate caution regarding an untested technology with potentially catastrophic implications, Rook corrected diplomatically. As would you. Were our positions reversed? Ben couldn't argue with that logic. And if he was honest with himself, having Rook along provided a measure of reassurance. His former partners, steady presence and tactical expertise would be valuable assets, particularly if the device proved more difficult to control in actual combat situations. Fine, he conceded. When do we leave? Why shuttle is prepared for immediate departure, Looma interjected. The situation on Koros grows more volatile by the hour. If your magical advisor can complete her preparations quickly, we should depart within the next rotation. I'll need access to specific materials, Charmcaster said. Crystalline conductors, binding agents, focal amplifiers, not exactly standard plumber equipment. I've anticipated this, Rook replied. Based on preliminary discussions, I've already authorized requisition of supplies from our Paranormal Containment Division. They should be delivered to Laboratory 7 within the hour. Charmcaster raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed despite herself. Efficient. I can work with that. Then we have our mission parameters, Ben said, feeling a strange mix of apprehension and anticipation. Investigate the Conclave's connection to the Pure Fist Rebellion, determine their interest in Koros, and hopefully find information about controlling this. He raised his wrist, the device's crimson display cycling through alien silhouettes as if sensing the coming conflict. And survive, Charmcaster added dryly. Let's not forget that rather important objective. Looma made a sound that might have been a Tetraman chuckle. Survival is assumed in any warrior's mission, magical one. It need not be stated explicitly. Cultural differences, Ben explained to Charmcaster's skeptical expression. In Tetraman philosophy, discussing survival as an objective is considered, what's the term, Looma? Redundantly obvious, the princess supplied. A warrior either returns victorious or does not return at all. There is no middle ground worthy of consideration. Right, Charmcaster drawled. No pressure there. As they dispersed to make their final preparations, Ben lingered in the chamber, studying the device on his wrist with newfound wariness. The test had confirmed what he'd suspected. With Charmcaster's tether spell, he could maintain sufficient control for combat operations. But it had also revealed how fundamentally different this device was from the Omnitrix he'd wielded for so many years. This wasn't a tool for understanding alien life or building bridges between species. It was a weapon, pure and simple, designed to extract and weaponize the most destructive aspects of alien DNA while discarding the balance that made those species whole. What exactly are you? He murmured to the device. And what do you want from me? The devil Omnitrix pulsed once with crimson light, as if acknowledging the question. But whatever answer it GHT have offered remained locked within its alien circuits, waiting to be revealed through the transformations to come. The journey to Koros took 16 hours by Tetraman Royal Shuttle, a testament to the vessel's advanced propulsion systems, as conventional transport would have required days to cover the same distance. Ben spent much of the trip reviewing mission briefings prepared by Plumber Intelligence, familiarizing himself with the current political landscape of Koros and what little was known about the Pure Fist faction. The shuttle's interior reflected the same blend of tradition and innovation that characterized Looma herself. Ancient weapons and ceremonial artifacts shared space with cutting-edge technology. The crew, 6 elite Tetraman warriors, maintained formal military discipline while demonstrating technical expertise that belied stereotypes about their species' supposed emphasis on brute force over intellect. In the vessel's small laboratory section, Charmcaster RKED tirelessly on the focus object for her tether spell. The space around her workstation pulsed with violet energy as she combined conventional materials with magical components, occasionally muttering curses when particular combinations failed to achieve stability. Rook divided his attention between monitoring communications from Earth and conducting his own analysis of the tactical situation they would face on arrival. His methodical approach complemented Ben's more intuitive style, a dynamic that had served them well during their years as partners. Looma primarily remained on the bridge, coordinating with her forces on Koros and receiving updates on the rebellion's progress. The reports grew increasingly concerning as their journey continued, more territories falling to Pure Fist control. More traditionalist houses declaring allegiance to the movement. 12 hours into the flight, Ben sought her out, finding the princess studying holographic battle maps with an expression of grim concentration. That bad? He asked, approaching the tactical display. Looma's 4 eyes remained fixed on the hologram, though she acknowledged his presence with a slight nod. Worse than expected. The Pure Fist has seized control of 3 major provinces, including mining regions critical to our technology production. My father's forces hold the capital and surrounding territories, but they're stretched thin. Ben studied the map, recognizing the strategic disadvantage. They're cutting off your resource supply lines while consolidating their own position. Classic insurgency tactics. Yes, but with unprecedented coordination. Looma manipulated the display, highlighting troop movements over the past week. The Pure Fist has always been a decentralized movement, loosely affiliated. Warriors united by ideology rather than structured command. She gestured to the perfectly executed pincer maneuvers and supply interdictions. This suggests central planning by someone with advanced military training. Someone not Tetraman. The Conclave, Ben concluded. They're not just supplying weapons, they're providing strategic direction. So it appears. Looma finally turned her attention fully to him. Her expression betraying momentary concern before returning to warrior stoicism. You look tired, Ben Tennyson. Does the device trouble your rest? He hadn't expected such a personal observation from her. Is it that obvious? To one trained in combat assessment, yes. Your reaction time is delayed by approximately 0.3 seconds compared to our previous encounters. Your pupils show micro fluctuations consistent with fatigue masking stimulants. And your posture exhibits compensatory adjustment patterns typical of one operating despite exhaustion. Despite the gravity of their situation, Ben found himself smiling. When did Tetramans become experts in human physiology? When this particular Tetraman decided that understanding allies and enemies alike provides tactical advantage. Looma replied matter-of-factly. Then, with unexpected softness, and when she decided that certain former, betrothed individuals warranted continued study. The statement hung between them, laden with implications Ben wasn't entirely prepared to address. Their history was complicated. What had begun as a cultural misunderstanding had evolved into a complex relationship of mutual respect, occasional antagonism, and something else that defied simple categorization. The device does interfere with normal sleep patterns, he admitted, steering the conversation back to safer territory. Dreams that aren't exactly dreams. Voices that might be its AI or might be something else entirely. Our legends speak of this, the Soul Eater whispering to its champion, of faring power in exchange for gradual surrender of self. Looma's lower right hand moved unconsciously to touch the scar on her face. The Pure Fist leader who wielded the fragment, before he triggered its self-destruct. He was ranting about voices showing him visions of Tetraman supremacy restored through ancient powers. Does your history record any champions who successfully resisted the corruption? Ben asked, the question that had been weighing on his mind since learning of the Tetraman legends. Looma hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal. One, she said finally. Wario, our queen from before the unification of Koros. Our oldest temples contain murals depicting her mastery of a soul eater, turning its hunger against our planet's ancient enemies without succumbing to its influence. How did she manage it? The legends are incomplete. Some speak of an anchor, a connection to something the soul eater could not corrupt or consume. Others suggest she found a way to satisfy the weapon's hunger without surrendering her own essence. Looma's expression turned thoughtful. In all versions, however, one element remains consistent. She refused to use the power for personal gain or glory. Only for the protection of others. Purpose over power, Ben murmured, remembering the clarity that had cut through Overload's hunger during the testing session. Precisely. Looma studied him with renewed interest. You've already discovered this principle. More stumbled onto it than discovered, he admitted. During the transformation test, when I focused on why I needed the power rather than the power itself, I could maintain control more effectively. Then perhaps you are more like our legendary queen than I initially believed. A hint of respect colored her tone. Few warriors discover such wisdom without centuries of training and meditation. Before Ben could respond, the shuttle's alert system activated, a low-pitched tone that immediately straightened Looma's posture. We're entering Koros space, she explained, moving toward the bridge. Standard procedure would have us transmit identification codes and approach through designated diplomatic channels. However, the Pure Fist might be monitoring those channels, Ben finished for her. And announcing your return with plumber assistance could trigger escalation. Correct. My pilot will Employ alternative approach vectors using terrain masking. It will extend our arrival time by approximately 2 hours but significantly reduce detection probability. Ben followed her to the bridge, where Rook and Charmcaster had already gathered, clearly drawn by the alert tone. The main viewport displayed the rust-colored sphere of Koros growing larger against the backdrop of stars, a harsh whir. LD of mountains and deserts that had shaped one of the galaxy's most formidable warrior species. Update. Rook inquired professionally. We're approaching Koros under stealth protocols, Ben explained. Looma's pilot is taking us in via terrain masking to avoid detection by pure fist forces. Charmcaster eyed the planet with undisguised apprehension. So we're sneaking onto a world in the mid-DLE of a civil war between 4 armed warriors who can bench press spacecraft. What could possibly go wrong? Many things, Looma replied, missing the sarcasm entirely. Which is why we have multiple contingency plans and emergency extraction protocols. That was rhetorical, Charmcaster muttered. Ah, Earth humor. Looma nodded as if cataloging the information for future reference. Inappropriate timing, but I understand the psychological function of tension release through verbalized absurdity. Despite the gravity of their situation, Ben found himself suppressing a smile. The interaction highlighted the cultural gaps they would need to navigate during this mission, gaps that extended beyond mere tactical considerations to fundamental differences in communication and worldview. Status of your magical focus? He asked Charmcaster, nodding toward the crystalline object she clutched in one hand. Functional, barely, she replied, holding up what resembled a violet gemstone set in a circular metal housing. It'll maintain the tether spell for approximately 6 hours of active transformation time. After that, it'll need recharging through direct magical infusion. That should be sufficient for initial operations, Rook observed. Though we should plan mission parameters with conservative transformation usage until we better understand the local situation. He shuttle banked sharply as it entered Chorus's atmosphere, following a trajectory that kept them within the shadow of a massive mountain range. Through the viewport, Ben caught glimpses of the lands. Cape below, vast red deserts punctuated by jagged rock formations, with occasional settlements visible as geometric patterns amid the harsh terrain. Our destination is the Temple of Ascension, Looma explained, bringing up a holographic map of their landing zone. Located in the Crimson Range, 20 kilometers from the nearest Pure Fist position. The temple complex includes underground facilities that house one of my father's forward command centers. From there, we can coordinate with loyal forces and access the ancient chambers containing the historical murals I mentioned. And if the Pure Fist has compromised this location? Rook asked, ever the tactician. Then we will have opportunity to test your device in combat immediately, Looma replied to Ben with typical Tetraman directness. The shuttle continued its approach, hugging terrain features to minimize sensor profile. As they descended toward a plateau nestled among towering red peaks, Ben felt the device on his wrist pulse more rapidly. As if responding to their proximity to Koros, or perhaps to something on the planet's surface. Something's wrong, he murmured, staring at the crimson display as it cycled through alien silhouettes at increasing speed. Charmcaster noticed immediately, moving to his side to examine the device. It's resonating with something nearby. Similar energy signature, probably another soul engine fragment. Sensors detect no unusual energy patterns, the Tetraman pilot reported after a quick scan. They wouldn't, Charmcaster explained. Soul engines operate partially in dimensional space outside conventional detection parameters. But Ben's device is reacting to something down there. Looma's expression darkened. If the Pure Fist has brought more soul engine technology to the temple. Her speculation was cut short as the shuttle suddenly rocked violently, alarms blaring throughout the vessel. The viewport filled with blinding light as something detonated nearby. Ambush! The pilot shouted, hands flying across controls as he attempted evasive maneuvers. Ground-based weapons targeting our approach vector. Impossible, Looma snarled. This landing zone was secure according to all reports. Another impact rocked the shuttle, systems flickering as damage reports cascaded across control panels. Through the clearing smoke, Ben caught sight of figures moving on He plateau below, Tetraman warriors in unfamiliar armor adorned with red symbols. Pure Fist, Looma confirmed grimly. They've anticipated our arrival. How? Rook demanded, already retrieving his proto-tool from its storage compartment. This mission was classified at the highest levels. Questions for later, Ben said, rising from his seat as the shuttle continued its now compromised descent. Right now we need to secure a landing zone. Charmcaster, is that focus ready? The sorceress nodded, holding up the crystalline object. Ready as it'll ever be. But Ben, we haven't tested it under actual combat conditions. No time like the present. He turned to Looma. Can your pilot get us close enough to the temple entrance for a fighting retreat? Affirmative, she confirmed. Alred. Why donning combat gauntlets that hummed with stored energy? But we'll need covering fire to reach it. The plateau offers minimal natural cover. Ben studied the tactical situation through the viewport. As the shuttle continued its damaged descent. At least 20 pure fist warriors visible, armed with both traditional Tetraman weapons and what appeared to be more advanced energy artillery. The MPLE entrance lay approximately 200 meters from the only viable landing zone, across open terrain broken only by scattered rock formations. The device on his wrist continued to pulse rapidly, cycling through available transformations as if eager to engage. Ben focused on the display, searching for a form that would provide maximum tactical advantage in the current situation, something that combined offensive power with defensive capabilities. The cycling slowed, then stopped on a silhouette that resembled a Petrosapian, diamond-head species, but with jagged, asymmetrical proportions. It suggested the same corrupted enhancement pattern as the previous transformations. I'll create a corridor to the temple, he decided. Rook, you and Charmcaster provide ranged support. Looma and warriors can handle any that get through my defensive line. A sound strategy, Rook agreed, though concern showed in his eyes as he glanced at the device. But Ben, remember our discussion about control parameters. If you feel the transformation overwhelming your consciousness, I'll signal for extraction, Ben finished. But we don't have the luxury of caution right now. As the shuttle made its final approach, systems straining against accumulated damage, Ben felt a strange calm settle over him. This was familiar territory, impossible odds, backed into a corner, with only his wits and transformation abilities standing between his team and disaster. For all the danger posed by the devil Omnitrix, there was something almost comforting about returning to the role he'd played for so much of his life. Get ready, Looma commanded as the shuttle touched down with bone-jarring impact. Exit on my mark. Ben met Charmcaster's eyes across the cabin. She held up the focus crystal, the OLED energy already swirling within its facets. Try not to get completely consumed by alien bloodlust, she said dryly, though genuine concern underlay her sarcasm. I put a lot of work into that tether spell. I'll do my best, Ben promised, positioning himself near the exit ramp as the shuttle settled onto the plateau's surface. Energy weapons fire immediately began impacting the vessel's hull, the metallic impacts creating a chaotic percussion. Looma activated the ramp controls, the hydraulic systems protesting but functioning. As the opening appeared, Ben pressed his palm to the device's interface, embracing the transformation even as the first wave of pure fist warriors charged toward the shuttle. Here we go again, he muttered as the crimson light engulfed him, the pain of transformation drowned out by the more immediate roar of battle. Chapter 2 End.